Hello, I'm Andrew Walding. This presentation is one in the Life's Big Questions series. In this presentation, we want to look at the question, why should I believe in a God I can't see? There's a very good reason why everyone should consider this question. Without God, the long-term future of this world looks very bleak. It is an unfortunate fact that virtually everything in our world is deteriorating. And sooner or later, that includes us as well. We all share this problem. Of course, if God exists, then maybe He has a solution to this world's long-term future. If we can find good evidence of a God who is willing and able to help, we should at least consider whether there could be a solution to our problem. We want to show you that there are very good reasons to believe that the God of the Bible has the answer to this question of our long-term future. The same God has answers to other questions as well. We can understand that you may have problems believing in a God you can't see. We like everything to be tangible in this world. We all believe in plenty of things we can't actually see, of course, based on the evidence that we have. The wind would be perhaps a very basic example. We don't see the wind, but we do see what it does. But just as the wind explains what we see here, so the existence of God explains many other things in the world around us. Another problem can be our personal circumstances. They can be very hard to fit in with our impression of a loving God. We'll be considering why a loving God allows suffering in a separate presentation. But for now, we should realize that suffering in the world doesn't prove or deny the existence of God. Peer pressure as well can be a big problem in believing in God. There are a lot of people who are very vocal in their belief that there is no God, whether that's people who appear in the media, or friends, or colleagues, or family. And it can be very easy to go with the flow with what those around us say. And of course, another problem is that we all lead very busy lives. Some things we just don't have the time to spend investigating, whether that's buying a particular brand of a laptop because a friend recommended it, or taking a certain route home because, well, it's the way I've always done it. And we can be like that with God and religion as well. We just go along with what we were brought up with, or with what our friends believe, or even what we might see on the news, or what figures of authority might say. But let's put these problems and preconceptions aside and explore some of the reasons for believing in a power greater than ourselves. Just as trees moving are visible evidence of the movement of air, so we want to help you to see the visible evidence to support a belief in God, even though we can't actually see Him. Let's just think how a judge or jury uses evidence. They look at the evidence before them. They then decide whether or not the accused is guilty. The more evidence that is presented, the more convinced the judge or jury are. We should use a similar method then to decide whether or not we should believe in a God. If there is no real evidence, then maybe we are wasting our time. If, however, there is a considerable amount of evidence of a God, we'd be foolish not to consider it. We all have a limited lifespan, so we'd be particularly foolish if we were to ignore the evidence of a God who is offering us something beyond our current short life. We'll look at the visible evidence in the world around us pointing to a God. We will also look at evidence that the Bible is a message from that God. First, we'll look at the visible evidence from the world around us. The evidence for a designer. The information stored in the cells that make up life. How did life begin? The universe is just right for life and seemed to know we were coming. And the laws of physics. Then we'll look at evidence in the Bible. Its accurate predictions. The law ahead of its time. The variety of people that wrote the Bible. And the ring of truth found in the Bible, The record is brutally honest about the people it describes. The first type of evidence we want to look at is evidence for a designer. We need to consider how we can detect design as opposed to random chance. If we came across a sequence of letters, such as this, we would say that they're random. There's no thought or design evident in that. If, however, we see letters that spell out a sentence, we can see that somebody has thought about this. There's evidence of a design and a designer behind this. And the same applies to the world around us. The carved heads of the American presidents on Mount Rushmore clearly show more evidence of design than the eroded rocks on the right, however beautiful they might be. We can see that the complexity there indicates a designer. If we'd never seen a mobile phone and we were given one, we would probably look at it and notice how complicated it looked. We'd see that there are buttons and other features that are obviously there for a purpose. We'd conclude that these features had been thought about. It'd be obvious that it had been designed and that there was a designer behind it. Well, scientists have discovered that there is far more complexity in the natural world than in a mobile phone. One example of this is that of how honeybees fly. Recent research has revealed some of the complex mechanisms that bees have. Their wing movements are very precisely controlled to enable them to fly. Bees are able to hover, move forwards, and turn. They use their wings to control these movements. As the bees' wings move down, they also move forwards. As the wings move upwards, they move backwards. Here we see a pictorial sequence of this cycle. We can see that the wings move from pointing up and backwards to pointing down and forwards. The bee is also able to rotate its wings. The bee's wings rotate between the up and down wing strokes that we've just looked at. On the downward stroke of the wing, the front or leading edge faces forwards. On the upward stroke, the leading edge faces backwards. This gives lift on the upward stroke. So we can see that the wing flips through about 120 degrees at the end of each stroke. The bee performs these precise wing movements at a staggering 200 times a second. Slight variations in the actual angles of the wings determine whether the bee hovers, moves forwards, or turns. But this is only a small part of what must be in place before a bee can fly. Bees have control systems every bit as complex as those of modern combat aircraft, which take years to design. Bees, like combat aircraft, must have all of these systems in place before they can fly. You'll find out how to obtain more information on these complex systems that enable bees to fly in the booklet accompanying the DVD. So our brief look at the honeybee tells us that all of its complex flight systems must be complete and fully functional before it can fly. This leads us to conclude that bees must have been designed and created fully functional by an intelligence greater than ours. We now want to think about the implications of the information stored in life. There is an incredible amount of information stored in each and every cell in our bodies. Information is needed to control energy production, waste disposal, chemical storage, and processing. This information is stored in our DNA, and here we see its structure. It's been estimated that there is enough information in the DNA of a single human cell to fill the Encyclopaedia Britannica, all 30 volumes of it, 3 or 4 times over. It's unreasonable to think that the Encyclopaedia Britannica was written without intelligence and just came about by chance. So, is it reasonable to believe that the information stored in our DNA was produced without intelligence? Again, we see evidence of intelligence behind our world. We'll now think about the difficult question, how did life begin? Throughout nature we see not only complexity, but levels of complexity that rely on each other, interdependency of one thing upon another. One couldn't survive without the other and vice versa. One example of this interdependency is seen in the cells which make up all of life. The cell walls are made up using complicated chemicals called enzymes. And yet these enzymes can't do their job unless they are kept in place by the cell wall. So it's difficult to see how the first cell appeared unless it was complete and fully functional. And there are many other examples where parts of animals, collections of cells, or proteins work together, and yet all are useless by themselves in their own individual parts. There's evidence that a creator put the workings of life and nature into place to enable life to begin. Next, we consider the fact that our universe seemed to know that we were coming. A well-known writer, Professor Paul Davies, wrote this in his book, The Goldilocks Enigma. If almost any of the basic features of the universe, from the properties of atoms to the distribution of the galaxies, were different, life would very probably be impossible. A bio-friendly universe looks like a fix or a put-up job, to use the pithy description of the late British cosmologist Fred Hoyle. It appeared to Hoyle as if a super-intellect had been monkeying with the laws of physics. He was right in his impression. Like the porridge in the tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the universe seems to be just right for life in many intriguing ways. No scientific explanation for the universe can be deemed complete unless it accounts for this appearance of judicious design. If we look at our Earth, we find that there are a large number of features about it that are just right to support life. These critical things include the distance from the Sun, the stability of the Sun, the size of the Sun and the Earth, the angle of the axis tilt of the Earth, the speed of its rotation, the proportion of land and sea on the Earth, and the composition of the atmosphere. It looks as though the universe and our Earth have been arranged to support life. Yet again, it seems there is some kind of intelligence behind our world. The last of the visible evidences in the world around us that we're going to look at is the laws of physics. The laws of physics are very precise. The pendulum on a clock depends on the law that states that a pendulum of a particular length always takes exactly the same time to swing from one side to the other. And that's why pendulums are used in clocks. Clocks with pendulums work with equal accuracy everywhere, showing that these laws are universal. Another example is the volume, temperature and pressure of the air in a car tyre. When the temperature goes down by a certain amount, the pressure will always go down by an exact related amount. Whenever we go in a motor vehicle, we rely on this law being constant. We'd be in serious trouble if this law wasn't constant and universal. Our modern world has developed the way it has because we understand and respect these laws. If these laws weren't constant, we could do a lot of research and develop something, only then to find that the basic rules had changed. The existence of these exact laws implies a lawgiver. It also seems that these laws have been formulated so that life can be supported. So we have seen several visible lines of evidence in the world around us of a God we can't see. This visible evidence from the world around us is not the only evidence of an invisible God. There is a lot of evidence that the Bible is a message from that God. I'll now hand over to Tech Morgan in our conference room, who'll look at some of that evidence.
Thank you. As Andrew has said, we now want to look at the evidence that the Bible is a message from a God we can't see. We'll take a brief look at the evidence now so that we can see how many different types there are. The many accurate predictions in the Bible form one of the main evidences of an invisible God. We can sometimes make predictions based on what we've seen in the past. Weather forecasters, market researchers, sales forecasters, they all try to predict what will happen. It has to be said, with varying degrees of success. Over 2,000 years ago, the God of the Bible made many accurate predictions about various cities and nations. These predictions are clear and direct. They're known to have been written before the event. They were written by people who had no influence to make them come true. And they were fulfilled by people who were not aware they were doing so. The Old Testament prophet Daniel gives us a fascinating prediction presenting a bird's eye view based on history from 600 years before Christ down to the present day and beyond. Daniel lived under the shadow of superpower Babylon. He predicted that after Babylon there would be 3 more superpowers, each overthrowing the previous one. These superpowers can easily be identified as Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. You might have expected Daniel to predict that Rome would be overthrown by another, but he didn't. He would have been wrong if he had. Instead, he predicted that the 4th superpower would divide and fall apart. The 4th superpower, Rome, did fall apart, leading to the formation of the nations of modern Europe. Unlikely though those predictions might have seemed, again, Daniel was 100% correct. Then there are predictions about various Middle Eastern nations. Some are about Egypt. They accurately predicted various distinctive aspects of Egypt's long history, like their long period of being ruled by ruthless foreigners. There are also predictions about Egypt's neighbours, the Jews. These predictions said that the Jews would be generally disliked, that they would be scattered all around the world, and that their history would be unlike that of any other nation. Finally, there are also distinctive predictions about other nations and cities in the Middle East. Again, the predictions are clear and different for every city and nation. The Bible prophets remarkably chose the right prediction for each situation. We look at these remarkable predictions in more detail in the Accurate Predictions presentations. When we think about it, these predictions are very powerful evidence of an invisible power that is greater than ourselves. Politicians would love to know what's going to happen in the world next week. But the Bible prophets made many accurate predictions hundreds of years in advance. Another significant evidence of an invisible God from the Bible is that it contains a law ahead of its time. The Bible detailed scientifically advanced community health practice and a morally advanced civil law that were thousands of years ahead of their time. We know something of the community health practice of the nations surrounding the Israelites from such documents as the Ebers Papyrus. This is the best record of ancient Egyptian medicine known. Some of the recommendations make sense to us today, but many, it has to be said, seem ridiculous in the light of modern scientific knowledge. The droppings in urine of a number of animals were prescribed, for example, for some medical conditions. The big difference with the law given to the early Israelites is that all of its community health recommendations make very good sense. It wasn't until the 19th century that most European countries discovered and adopted ideas found in this 3,000-year-old law. If we'd only taken the Bible's advice on sewage disposal and hygiene earlier, many lives would have been saved. In fact, in some respects, we're not yet caught up with this remarkable law. For example, this law said that every 50 years, the land should go back to its original owners. This meant that the amount of money they could raise by selling their land was controlled by the number of years still to go till the 50th year. At the 50th year, the wealth of the nation returned to its original owners, and everyone could have a fresh start. Obviously, things have changed since the days of that law, but it was a very wise provision that limits borrowing and prevents the rich getting richer and the poor becoming poorer. Financial problems caused by borrowing too much might not occur if similar restrictions on borrowing were now in force. Next, we'll think about the variety of people who wrote the Bible. The Bible is made up of 66 individual books. They were written down by people of many occupations, spread over a time period of hundreds of years. Here, we see the large variety of backgrounds, cultures, and time periods from which the writers of the books of the Bible came. As you can see, there is a vast range of backgrounds. If we think about this for a moment, we'll see how remarkable this is. The Bible was written over a period of 1,500 years. Writings from 1,500 years ago would seem quaint and out of date to us. For example, writings from a fisherman who lived in 500 AD would hardly be considered very relevant to a 21st century statesman. Yet in the Bible there is a consistent message about life and its meaning. An evidence of this consistency is the way that echoes of thought are to be found throughout the Bible. These are themes and ideas which keep appearing. Just as sound sometimes produces echoes that come back to us, so the Bible has themes and ideas that keep recurring. There's a book entitled The Treasury of Scripture Knowledge that contains no less than 500,000 Bible links and ideas. It's a very useful book to help us find those echoes. The Treasury of Scripture Knowledge is now to be found in some computer packages. You'll find it very useful if you want to trace those themes and ideas as they recur. So we have one more example of evidence of an intelligence we can't see. The final aspect of the Bible to consider is the ring of truth that is found in it. The Bible is unique among the world's history books. It's brutally honest about the great men it describes. In that way, it gives a balanced picture. It tells us what to admire in these people, and with equal frankness, it tells us where each one of them fell down. Most records of ancient kings are noticeably silent about their misdeeds. Understandably, they usually concentrate on how great and mighty they were. It's the media in our day that often expose facts about leaders that they would rather hide. After all, no leader wants his bad points to be public knowledge. And great efforts are sometimes made to conceal them. It's a natural reaction to want to hide our weaknesses. It's the Bible that gives an unusually balanced view. Here are some examples. Abram was one of the greatest characters of the Old Testament, yet he betrayed his wife to save his own life on more than one occasion. King David is another famous Old Testament character, yet he slept with another man's wife and then conspired to have her husband murdered, and that's fully disclosed. The men who founded the first century church are all shown initially as selfishly wanting to be number one. Before he became a follower of Jesus, the great New Testament preacher Paul condemned many people to death because he disagreed with what they believed. And again, that's fully disclosed. We can see that the Bible is unlike any other record of history in being brutally honest. That ends our very brief look at the large amount of evidence pointing to the fact that the Bible is a message from a power greater than ourselves. We look at some of this evidence in more detail in other Life's Big Questions presentations. I'll now hand you back to Andrew, who will summarise what we have seen.
Thank you, Tech. We've seen that we all have a very limited lifespan, so it would be particularly foolish if we were to ignore the evidence of a God who's offering us something beyond our current short life. We reminded ourselves that we believe in many things we can't see based on the evidence we have. We can't see the wind, but we can see its effects, and so believe that wind is air moving. We have seen that a judge or a jury looks at evidence, and if there are many pieces of evidence, all pointing to the same conclusion, that evidence is compelling. Next, we looked at no less than 9 different types of evidence of a God we can't see, and there is more. Hopefully this is enough to make you start thinking about this. We hope you'll want to look at these vital issues in more detail. We saw that complexity indicates a designer. The remarkable complexity that scientists have discovered in the natural world tells us that there is a remarkable, intelligent creator behind it. We noted that it's unreasonable to think that the Encyclopaedia Britannica was written without intelligence. And so we ask, is it reasonable to believe that the phenomenal amount of information in our DNA was produced without intelligence? We saw that it's difficult to see how the first cell appeared unless it was complete and fully functional. And there are many other examples where parts of animals, collections of cells or proteins work together, and yet all are useless by themselves. Next, we saw that there are a large number of features about planet Earth that are just right to support life. It looks as if the universe and our Earth have been arranged to support life. Finally, we saw that the laws of physics are very precise. The existence of these laws implies a lawgiver. We then looked at the evidence of a God we can't see in the Bible. We saw that we can sometimes make predictions based on what we have seen in the past. Weather forecasters, market researchers, and sales forecasters all try to predict what will happen, with varying degrees of success. The God of the Bible, however, has made many predictions, including some that past experience would have indicated would not happen. These predictions have all been proved to be 100% accurate. Next, we looked at the law in the Bible, having community health recommendations that make very good sense with our modern scientific hindsight. In fact, in some respects, we've not caught up with this law yet. We then saw that there is no other book in the world written by so many different authors, spread over a period of 1,500 years, that has one consistent message. And evidence of this consistency is the themes and ideas which keep appearing through the Bible. Finally, we saw that the Bible is unique amongst the world's history books. It is brutally honest about the great men it describes. It gives a balanced picture. It tells us what to admire in them, and with equal openness, it tells us where each one of them fell down. We hope you agree that there is a lot of evidence to look at. So we've seen a wide variety of evidence of a God we can't see, both in our world and in the Bible. You can find more information on the Life's Big Questions website, www.lifes-big-questions.org. You can also send for other Life's Big Questions DVD presentations. We'll give you the address at the end. We hope you'll want to look at the evidence in more detail and also find out more about the message this God has for you. It could have implications for your long-term future. Thank you for listening.